Hey, buddies. Good to see everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us in the chat. So, it's another exciting night for reviewing comics. Yeah, that's what we like to do. We're party animals over here. We get down with our comic books and we have hour-long discussions about them. So, yeah, that's the kind of freaks that we are. So, why don't you freak with us tonight? Everybody else is freaking on their channels. It's freaking awful to watch that crap. So thank you for being here. It shows that you have taste and class. We have an elevated standard of audience here, and congratulations for being among them. We have Hearn the Steadfast. Hail, chat. Hail back, buddy. Thank you very much for being here. And of course, Corey Barton. We're going to be talking about your book tonight. It's KOZOR. The Ultimate Freaks. So, really interesting project. I've dug this art all the way back from when I saw this campaign originally getting promoted. Been really excited to see this come out, and yeah, finally getting a chance to review it. We got a great panel. The guys are high tea, ready to go, except for one of them. He might be no tea, a tea amputee, you might say. But we'll make do. Everybody else can compensate. We've also got Linkovich Chamovsky. He says, oi, representing the Aussie side of comics. Barton Bros, of course, are Australian, and that's where this book hails from. So we'll get into the details in a little while. We've got Aldous, of course, joining us in the chat and joining us on the panel. I'll bring him in shortly. And yeah, everybody get ready because it's time to freak right now. Hey, Twiddless. I had to pump up your intro because
I appreciate it. Yeah. When do I actually get like a video intro?
Oh, what do you think this is? CG Slumlords?
I mean, like Matt Barr has one. You gave him one.
No, I didn't. I had to give it to Jay Dollar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was more appropriately suited for the Jay Dollarino. Milano's here. He says, what a hype. Yeah. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to hype you guys up. Get you hyped like JSC. Hello, of course. We also have the ultimate hype man. We've got Matt Barr.
What's up?
There we go. There's that energy.
What's going on, guys?
Bringing it for KOZOR. And of course, the man who takes all the heads, chopping them down with his big fat bladed axe. Got Aldous.
I have an axe now?
Yeah, you got an axe. You got an axe to grind. Exactly.
One leg is shorter than the other. I've spent some time on that sharpening wheel. As always, it's a pleasure to be here, Well Read. Thank you for the invite. Always good to be on here. Great to be on here with Barr. Oh, and Twitless is here too.
Oh, yeah, huh?
Come on, Twitless. You're going to have to try to keep up. This is the man's night. We're talking about barbarians and bare-chested, brutes, axing things.
Excuse me while I go get my milk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Take the tweet off. Come on, Twitless.
Yeah. Just don't review it with a milk mustache. I'll never let you on my channel again.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Let's bring up the campaign and check out what all the hubbub was about. So KOZOR did pretty well, considering that they were doing a lot of their own self-promotion. The Barton Bros. It's also their first campaign. 43K with 825 backers, and I think it's sold mainly on the strength of the art alone, because it was really stunning to see it. It really pops, in my opinion. Sorry, I'm not supposed to be biased here and giving my impressions as the host, but yeah, I think the project kind of sold itself just looking at the campaign. It's 48 full pages, fully colored, and there's 3 cover variants, so not too shabby overall. What is your guys' take on the campaign? Were you impressed by this when you first saw it on Indiegogo? I'll go with the high tea Twitless.
Oh, thanks. Okay. No, I agree. And I definitely got, and we'll talk about this during the interview, but I definitely got some Conan, H.P. Lovecraft kind of vibes, but then artistically, a little bit of Berserk as well, I think, actually. So if you're a fan of those things, I think you'd be instantly drawn to what you're seeing on the cover there, or the pinup art.
What do you think, Aldous, Matt Barr? You gonna let Twitless get away with those takes? Is
Yeah,
this-
I'll follow.
I
I'll
liked
follow.
it. I mean, I thought it was an interesting looking campaign. From what I was seeing, it looked pretty cool. You know, it looked original but unique. Looked kind of wild. Yeah,
Uh,
I like the way the campaign looked.
Corey is a
Yeah.
fan of Berserk, so probably
Not
did have some.
I am not surprised.
Yeah, I don't think that shocks anyone. I do think it carried over those tones, in my opinion, to kind of add a little bit onto what Twitless said. I do concur with that. It does have that Robert E. Howard savage sort of Conan from the 70s, but with a modern flair and with a little bit of that Berserk influence. And there's a little bit of undercurrent, at least of what I took away from it, also of like some eerie, creepy style horror kind of blended in a little bit more so than you ever saw in Savage Sword. And maybe to its detriment, maybe not. I think we'll get into that.
I also did anyone else get a cross-gen vibe from some of it too?
A little bit much later in the book and more with page layout.
Okay.
Interesting. Well, and seeing graphic scenes like this jump out on the campaign, to me, that's always a plus. I like to know that I'm getting a mature book when I'm backing something, that I'm not just trying to help out a creator and maybe they're doing a more kids-oriented property, that this is something I'm going to want to read too. So yeah, definitely dug all of this. I guess set the scene for us, Twitless. What is KOZOR about? Give us your VHS back of the box pitch.
VHS back to the box. Okay.
Mhm.
In a strange and hostile world, Chief
Jesus.
Baron and his band of barbarians stalks to a grimy swamp in order to chase down the source of his haunting nightmares. What he finds there will set in motion events that will not only change his life forever, but also his daughter Alice and the very world itself. Find out what horrors tug at the strings of the mind in KOZOR.
There's a daughter involved. That's interesting.
Well, you can kind of see right there where it says father.
Oh yeah. Spoilers right on the campaign. So it added a lot of layers to the character, I guess. Gave him a little bit of depth.
Give him a motivation.
Gave him a motivation. The magic M. You always want that in a book. Made it easier to identify with the main protagonist. What do you think?
I'm gonna let. I mean, I already did. I did my VHS box part. Someone else talk.
I'm hearing seething and coping.
Relate to the guy? It's hard to relate to the guy. I'm just kind of like watching what happens.
Oh.
I
So
mean,
we're just
he's
going
got
through
a
the
fucked up
paces.
eye. No, I'm not saying we're going through the paces. I'm just like watching a fever dream of somebody else. Like I don't know what, you know, the guy. I don't really relate to the bald guy with the chicken, the lizard thing on his head.
Red Rooster.
Yeah. With like the eyeball and stuff. Like I was like, what's going on with this guy? Like I'm not like I don't see myself in him as he's banging his little yellow slaves.
That was a joke. I like Mitch Brettweiser.
So,
I think. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
well, no, you go ahead, Aldous, please.
Well, I was just going to say, I think, and I had to step away for a minute, but going to the motivation part, it gives them a motivation, but as far as relatability, and I'm just going to come out and say this, I think the book is trying really hard for one thing, and I don't think it hits what I think it's going for. And I say that because I can break this book up into 4 parts, and I think what they're trying to do is build something up and then drop into something else and then kind of revisit what they built up originally. And I'm not sure that works with the way it's structured. So I think it loses, at least it lost me very early on in the story as far as where it was headed. And I kept on reading and it never really came back around. So it's kind of one of those moments where while they don't do a Chekhov's gun, it's kind of one of those where I expected more and it didn't deliver on that with what it hinted at here on the first few pages.
This is a hard book to talk about from a writing perspective. I'll say that the hits for me. So I want to start with some of the strengths. The concept and lore building are interesting. We have a dark fantasy world that's being created here, and it's a world where the writing and the storytelling are stripped of a lot of the guardrails. So one of the things I have to praise about this book is that it removes plot armor from certain characters you would expect them from. So the guardrails of, oh, here's the super sexy boss queen slay kind of a character. And in most media, she would be the one who has a lot of plot armor. And characters like that, the Barton brothers are not afraid to go, no, actually, you know, there's no guardrails on this ride, or at least not where you think they are. So it's kind of refreshing that we're dropped into this very dark world. And again, kind of like with Berserk, where characters who you would expect to be, to live or to have certain protection do not have it. So that's all. Those are all hits. Those are all strong things. The psychological horror aspect here, very Lovecraftian, is also. I like Lovecraft. I like Robert E. Howard. So that's always going to kind of draw me in a little bit. Those things work really well. The problem with the story is that it simultaneously gives too much and not enough. It's really, really weird to talk about it, because when it comes to the movement of the actual story being told, this is basically another prologue book. By the time we get to the end of the 48 pages or so, all we're really left with is a setup for next time we're really going to tell you the story.
Yeah.
So it does that, but then it does something else that I really think is a huge miss, which is while it's doing that, it is also giving us way too much information on the Lovecraftian side.
Yes.
When you have a Lovecraftian horror, one of the main aspects that makes that work is not just what you know, but what you don't know. And so a lot of Lovecraft's writing and with Robert E. Howard's, when he's kind of, teasing out the monster that will be revealed that Conan or whatever has to fight, is, a lot of hints and a lot of showing things in shadow and not really revealing fully what that horror is. But about halfway through this book, we get a lore dump, and it's basically like everything. And it's just... So while the story, it's just getting started, I already feel like the payoff for the story has already been given to me, which feels like I'm being told the story completely backwards. And I can't help but theorize that maybe the Barton brothers maybe they really liked the design of their monster, because their monster design here is really on point. It's some of the strongest that I've seen from a CG book.
What do you think, Matt Barr? Like, how strong are the designs in this book? I'd like to actually get some of your takes on that.
Yeah.
I think they're pretty good. I mean, everybody has a pretty distinct look. I'm okay with it. That's not
just
really,
okay.
I don't really have a problem. No, I mean, I do like them. I do like some of the designs once you start looking at it. The monster is like a giant crow kind of a thing, is like the main kind of like monster that they're fucking with. The girls are pretty nude. It's like your basic barbarian stuff, your basic savage sort of Conan.
Matt, what did you think of like the main Lovecraft monster, the skull god of rotten death? Because I thought
that was pretty cool. I did think that was pretty cool, with like the giant like green penis thing coming out of his head. But again, it was like, oh shit! Like I see, you see this giant monster, and you're like, oh shit! He's finally gonna swing this fucking axe that he's been carrying around. Nope. It just kind of ends.
Well, so it sounds like you got left flat, but like Twitless is saying they shot their load, kind of world building wise, plot wise. So, which is it exactly? Like there wasn't enough of, I guess, a stimulating payoff. They just wanted to get a lot of the lore out. And maybe they occupied a lot of space in the book with that.
The narrative basically stops right at the moment where things would have gotten interesting, and then gives the lore dump, which, like I said, is a payoff that I think you should save for much later in the story. Most stories that have monsters like this, you want to build up to this. But it was like, I got the entire life story of the monster. And I'm like, I feel like that's a huge mistake, because a lot of writing errors you can cover up, but blowing your payoff, that's a hard one to come back from. So I was kind of left in a very weird position regarding the narrative. Sorry, Aldous, I've been going on too long. What is your take on that?
So like I said, I think just to break the book down, essentially it opens with a sequence that reveals itself to be a dream. And then you get a second sequence where the army of the character, the Baron, unpacks their camp and enter into a swamp. And
Pack
then
your shit.
Yeah, he gets sucked down into the earth, and then you enter a fourth section or a third section. And then from that, you kind of go through this ritualistic torture and both mental anguish and physical anguish. And then you end on another vision quest. And the way I took the story is that the first part is a dream. The second part is a manufactured reality making him relive that moment. The third part is real time, and then the fourth part is another manufactured dream. And in that sense, with what Twitless is talking about, the overabundance of information makes sense because it's a dream. So he's going to be constantly reinforcing the feedback that he's getting. And the real part, that part 3 that's happening real time, is where they reveal too much. And that where, if like what was referenced when you're talking about the eldritch horror or the terror, they do too much showing. That should be a slow buildup. You should show what's happening to the character, but not the monster.
Yes.
Because the monster always needs to be, with the minute you show the monster, you lose all of your power.
Yep.
Because now the monster is identified. So whether it's Robert E. Howard in Valley of the White Worm, as Nord is constantly hearing Gorn talk about the White Worm that is worshipped by the ape men, you don't get a description until he's well into stalking it, and then he finally sees it, and it's more terrifying than even you could comprehend. But the description it's short and brief because he just sees it for a moment. And then he has to kill it. And that's what you want to keep. And here they do too much of the show. You want to keep that withdrawn. Everything else works in that third part. It's just, it feels disjointed if that's how the story is supposed to progress, which is what I took it as, is that the only portion that's quote unquote real is that portion where he's being tortured after he's already been sucked into the muck.
The stuff with the daughter at the end is also, I think, real.
No, I think that's in his head. I think that's another vision.
I think part of it's real, and part of it is her going again into. I could be wrong. I don't know.
They do the reversal, right? So in the beginning, he's coming up to his daughter, and she turns, and her face is
it's
destroyed.
Yeah.
And at the end, it's the opposite. The daughter's approaching him, and then his face is inverted. So it's the two sides of the dream world, right? One is to the abject terror of seeing your child, and the other is the abject terror of your child seeing you. So it's the inversion concept. If you're a David Lynch fan, in Lynchian isms and Lynchian films, from specifically Twin Peaks and Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, they call this a fire walk. And it's when you make a choice, and he makes his choice in the swamp, and then he has to relive the consequences of the result of his selection of the fire walk. And I took it like part 1 is presenting, or the portion in the swamp where he's reliving the trauma of losing everybody, and that visage with his daughter that's the preamble to the end.
Maybe, but there is an entire scene though of her like in a frozen wasteland doing stuff with new monsters, and I'm pretty sure that's like, not a dream. I think that's just her doing stuff.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, and I did forget to mention it because I'm talking about the last part when so that section is real, but that ties in with the real of him in the swamp. Like as he's being tortured, that's her real. That portion is real. I'm talking about the end part.
Her final dream. You think that's in his head?
When she falls and then looks up and sees her father. That's her dream, right? So now the process is repeating, and she's leading into the same process that her father did, and it's a repetition. Now it's her fire walk is where we're going to steal that moniker.
Paulus Art says, "Oh yeah, I didn't get that subtext. I got to reread this." This is interesting. It sounds like it's got a lot of layers to it, actually.
The layers are cool. The layers are neat. Like I said, the psychological things that are games that are being played, there's some cool ingredients here, but I really feel like there was like I said, I feel like the Barton brothers designed this maybe coming from the art background side. You design a really cool monster and then you want to show it off. Right. And
Absolutely.
I feel like they might have been, that temptation might have been too strong because, but then it wasn't just the visual. It was like so much narration. It was like the entire birth history of this monster. And it's like, man, if you want to tease that over some time, in Berserk, to give a visual example, it takes a while for the God Hand to show up. And then even when they do, it takes even longer to really start getting details about them. The creator is dead, and we're still, I think we're still kind of in the dark about a lot of that, how they work. So I'm not saying you have to do what Berserk does, but exactly. But I think it is important, the principle of not in your prologue giving too much of your monster. Aldous, I think, pegged it correctly when he said, you know, once you reveal the monster in the light, you lose a lot of the impact of what that monster can do for your story.
I'd like to peg this yellow slave.
Well, he did.
Mary did. Hey-o.
Pack your shit. Pack your shit, women. Dude,
yeah.
Mean. Pack your shit, bitches.
Well, he's got options.
It's basically this. That's basically the scene. I do want to bring up one other thing about the writing that I think is a slight miss, which is I think the dialogue is a little too modern.
Yes.
So I think it would hit stronger if you could channel. They don't have to speak in Old English, but you just put a little veneer of them not talking like contemporary modern day America. Add a little layer of foreignness to how they speak here and there. Some of the characters it's like they're bantering from, like, you know, current day, you know, metropolitan America, and it just
well, even to add on to that a little bit, it's a little bit more, and I don't usually have a problem with verbosity, but this is a little bit more verbose for its own good. For example, when she's collapsing in the frozen wasteland after she's run, she goes, you know, I can't go on. I can't go on any longer. But she doesn't need to say that. She just needs to say, I can't go on. If she's exhausted, why is she still talking? It's just little things like that are like a little bit of a cheese grater on the brain. And in addition to that, I like a lot of the pieces here, and I like eggs, and I like flour, and I like chocolate chips, and I like vanilla. And when you mix them all up and you make chocolate chip cookies, they're fantastic. But this just feels like it needed a little more time in the oven. There's a lot of pages that don't work for me on progression. I think, especially when you get into that third section where he's being tortured, I think the structure, there's a couple of the art is absolutely beautiful, but there's a lot of the narration didn't flow right. As you're looking across these beautiful 2-page spreads, I'm stopping to read in places where I should just be allowing the art to breathe. And I thought that was a little bit of a miss. What I'd really like to see is the next installment of this, or what these guys do after this, after getting a lot of this feedback. Because I know, man, so when this came out, there was a lot of feedback that there was some difficulty in understanding what was going on, and it didn't really read that smooth. So what I want to see is how much can they adapt this process, because there's a lot to like here. It's just it's all in pieces. I don't like the fully assembled piece. I don't like the whole ensemble. I like just the horn section of that part, and I like just the violins over here.
So I'd like to get Matt's take actually on just like his reader's impression without diving into the Lynchonian. How do you say that? Without lynching the book. What was your reader's impression? Just going through it as a comic, and you know, trying to experience the story in the world for what it was.
So as I was reading it, I could kind of figure out. You know, I'm not as smart as these other guys. I just draw shit. At first, I knew what was going on. I could kind of tell, okay, that was a dream. He's waking up. And then the story just kind of like lost me. There's some art stuff that was just really bugging the shit out of me. And then right when I was like, okay, we're gonna do some weird stuff, you know, they show us the monster in the mud. It just kind of like switches, and like we're showed like you're, I guess you guys are calling it like a dump, like a narrative dump. There's just like a whole bunch of like, and then let me show you what happened here, and then there's like some other stuff. There's like some naked women, but these are like they're not 2-page spreads. They're all just like single splash pages. So it's like you open up the page and like what could be a really cool double page splash isn't. It's like just a whole bunch of stuff, and there's like words everywhere. I don't
No,
know. So I was
and
like,
Matt, no, I do stand corrected. You're right. I did misspeak. They are not they are 2-page single splash pages. It's
yeah.
they're
So it's just a bunch of splash pages, and it would be like, damn, that would have been a fucking crazy like double page spread of this like hellscape, you know,
and there
rather
are
than just
4 of
like
them in a row.
goofy. I mean, it's like the women are, yeah, it's just like more in a row, and it's just like, and I was like, is this something different? Is this a different part? Like, is this some sort of like, you know,
Right, and I took that. That's where I think
you know,
that's
Solomon Kane pro shit? Because I was like, what the fuck are all these names? Zipazagazan. I was like, what
Some
the
of
fuck is this shit?
some of the character introductions are not well handled. There's this like little frog guy, and you only really learn his name. And I didn't even know he was really. I was reading a little quickly, and I barely even knew he was in the story until like they said his name, and it's like, oh look, there's this little frog character.
I can't
Yeah.
believe you forgot Gorf's name.
And then we get to the guy up in the castle tower getting like eaten on and shit. I was like, yeah. And then there's the people out in the snow with the giant other monster with his guts hanging out. The chick's missing her arm and shit. I was like, what the fuck is going on?
Can I pick your brain, Matt, for a second on one thing about the art that I did want to critique was I feel like the male poses worked better than some of the women's poses. Some of the women's poses on some of these pages looked a bit awkward to me. So let me find a page to talk about where that
If
happens.
Matt doesn't want to reference, I've got a couple of citations.
All the faces look kind of off a little bit. Like let's say you got 100 pennies and you're applying it to your art. It seems like maybe 30 of those pennies went to like structure, and then the rest of the pennies, the other 70, went to just like rendering the shit out of it.
Yeah, you can see that there's a heavy stylization, right?
Lots of stylization. And then when I go through it, I'm going, okay, they could do really good faces. You're doing really good close-ups of faces. You know, front profile, guy standing here, guy kind of standing, now behind, another close-up, guy standing just straight up. Then he's laying in bed, but it kind of looks like he's standing up while he's laying in bed. There's like not really a lot of like action poses. Like there's not a lot of movement of the form in space. It's just a lot of like standing. I'm standing. Here I am standing pretty much. Oh, here's we're showing this woman. It's a far back view of her just kind of standing. And it looks kind of, you know, there's not a lot of like dynamic movement of the camera, I think. Right. You know? There's like, oh, fucking worm's eye view of this guy walking. Like, there's a little bit of a fucking tilt when he walks out of the fucking tent, but like that's pretty much it. Like everything else is pretty much just like, you know, just straightforward.
To your point, Matt. When you get to the section at the end of the torture sequence, and now you're in the frozen wasteland, and it's the assumption is it's his daughter. There's two things there. I didn't even catch that, man. It's a great call because every scene after that, it's the same perspective shot. The inset panels aren't, but every main panel is the same shot. It's the same angle. But the thing I did notice is the length of the humerus that's sticking out of her wounded arm is constantly in a state of flux, panel to panel to panel to panel. And it's at the point where it's noticeable. Like at first there's none, and then there's a little bit, and then there's like a couple inches, and then there's a little bit again. Like it changes, and it's distracting. And then it all leads up it leads up to a reveal that feels like it should mean something. But again, everything is at that perspective, right? It's always the same perspective. Other than that, you get one change where you see her eye, which now implies that you've switched to the viewer. You've switched away from the narrative worm's eye view to her worm's eye view because she's prone, and then you see what you assume.
But the
is
prone
KOZOR.
is still pretty much her laying is pretty much a
It is.
standing
That's
position.
what I'm saying. It's a brilliant
It's pretty much
observation
just like a
because
standing position.
right, even though you've changed, you've illustrated to the reader now where your perspective changes, the perspective hasn't changed. So that's a great call, man.
So to add to one final thing there, and then one final thing I'd like to add to that, and thank you for bringing this up, Matt. I just realized this when you said people just standing there. These characters have really cool looking weapons. I think I'd like to see them swing those weapons more often.
I already called, dude. Not to jump on your shit, but I already called that out. I was like, I see this fucking dope ass fucking axe. I need to see him use it once.
That's a really good call.
Did he? I think he had he's fighting guys in the mud with no faces, right? Does he I don't think he swings on them.
No, he watches everybody around him start to die, and then he gets sucked into the mud.
But even the chick who
dude, that would have been a dope 2-page spread of several of these crow fucks swinging on him, and he's like just cleaving them in half and shit. Instead it's just like him standing, fucking that same perspective. It's just like him standing with his bird above him.
And the other to add to that, the other characters who also have weapons do more standing in a pose like they're about to swing than actually swinging, and so that's definitely something to improve on for future installments. Like make those, put them in more action. Like have the swing. Let's see those weapons being used. So that's
if we could though, I would like to take a moment and I know you forgot his name, but we do get Gorf, using his weapon and it is a nice scene where he goes right for the eye for the creature after it rips apart the chick, Lena. But there's also,
which is hard to tell, right? Like the ripping of her apart at when I was like, who the fuck is that? Like it's her. She looks kind of behind her. You hear a squawk. I mean, it's some of the stuff is really cool. Like the beak looks pretty cool, but then it's like you can't tell like who that is, like being underneath all the gore.
The top right hand corner is an example of what I was talking about with awkward posing for the woman. Like you see that top right hand panel? No, on the other page, on the right hand page. Yeah, just the way she's just kind of like
she's popping a squat, man.
Yeah, squatting in the air. So I feel like with the male characters, they're all posed really well. I didn't notice any issues, but like the female characters, I kept noticing it was like she's just like floating in an interesting. So that was kind of something I did notice.
Also, there's a page where I guess the crow fuckers are attacking, and you got the little gold chicks in the back, right? The wagon hits a rock, smash. All the shit goes flying in the back, but like they are not moving at all. Like their poses haven't changed at all from like the previous panel.
Yeah, it's
Does that make sense? Like there's no like
the camera's just moved 180 and it's a different perspective, and the one has shifted her position, but the other one hasn't moved from her.
But there's still they're like everything else is like up in the air, right? Which is like, okay, that's cool because I have a panel in Rock and Roll Ninja where there's a guy getting thrown through shit. So he's like clearly like not touching the ground, and there's like food and shit flying through the air. You know what I mean? So it's like they're nailing it. Like there's shit flying through the air, but like I don't know, maybe these girls are made out of gold, and so they're just like heavier or something.
Right. Well, and this is where
I would have been cool to see like they're like hopping up, like they're up above the ground, their asses are showing.
No, for sure. I think there's opportunities there, but this is also where I think that this isn't happening and it's all a projection, because you get these little vignettes of moments. So you get the vignettes of people dying, and then like that entire page is entirely out of context, because suddenly we have the wagon and they're talking, and then there's a smash, and it's not the wagon hitting a rock because the wagon doesn't appear to be in motion. It's this giant creature emerging.
Oh,
and you
yes, you're right.
Smash. And then the people in the back of the wagon are thrown about. And then all you have is this giant creature. And then we're done. We move on. Like we don't know what happens.
Mm. I mean, did you feel like you were a little lost, Matt, on some of those moments where it's like it was
Oh,
taking
fuck
a
yeah, dude.
major left turn?
Okay, so Matt, let
Yeah,
me follow.
dude, because that is you're. I mean, you're right. I was like, why are they not floating? I mean, everything else is floating. Where the fuck is this worm coming from? And then all of a sudden, you switch to like some chick sitting in the fucking muck with her sword up. Like, what is she swinging at?
So
She's
Matt,
just posing there. Like, are you
I wanna
swinging at vines? Are you swinging at fucking foliage? You know what I mean? Like, what are you fucking swinging at?
I want to
You're in
follow
the
up with
mud.
that because this story clearly wants to have some like psychological mind screw stuff. So there are moments where we're clearly supposed to be lost in the story. So for you, where do you draw the line for this is an acceptable mind screw and this is a storytelling like mistake? Where do you draw that line?
Who are you asking the question to?
Matt,
Yellow,
Matt. I was asking Matt.
yellow
I don't
slate
know,
shift.
man. I need to have something. I need to have like some plain. I need to have like some vanilla next
Something to
to the
ground
fucking
you.
crazy. Yeah, like the thing just starts off buck wild and just doesn't stop.
Like a relatable, character to tether you into the story.
Yeah,
Lead
there's
you through
nothing
it.
relatable. I'm like I'm just watching somebody's like nightmare fever dream.
Right. And now, in the defense of the story, I think the intention is the segment after he's being tortured in the swamp. I think the segment with his supposed daughter walking through the wasteland is supposed to be the grounding moment. The
Yeah.
initial them breaking camp is supposed to be a grounding moment, and then that's supposed to be the grounding moment. But I think it's because of the initial opening with the dream sequence, and then as you progress through the camp sequence, when you get to the swamp, at least my assumption again is that's a secondary dream sequence of projection, and then you get to
Jesus.
the reality, and then it goes back to that's the only way it makes sense. So that's my assumption, is that's what they're trying to do, and I think that whole arc could have been handled much better with if you ground the front end of each. I think it works a lot better.
I want this whole thing to end up in like the mind of a little like mentally challenged kid, like St. Elmo's Fire. You know what I mean? Remember that? Like the whole show, St. Elmo's Fire was like all in the mind of a little autistic kid.
St.
Like,
Elsewhere.
is it St. Elsewhere? Sorry.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm talking about. They're like, that's what I would love for this. If like the last panel was like just some fucking dude sitting in a bed and everybody's just like around him. So you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. This is all like just some fucking crazy like coma fever dream,
Yeah.
But I'm just not sure where to like hop in. Does that make sense? Like,
I think that's kind of what I was getting at when I said there's too much and not enough. There's too much of the stuff that it should dial back on, and there's not enough of the stuff that we need to ground ourselves. So, like I said, it ends up getting hit from both of those from a structural standpoint. I think that leads to some kind of just this kind of like blank feeling. Like I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. There's a lot of interesting stuff, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this from a storytelling perspective as an audience person yet. And because I don't know, as Matt's saying, that there's a certain lack of investment because I have as Aldous said, I have the ingredients for a cake, but I don't have a cake yet.
Well, tell me about the climax then. How did that work for you guys? Because, yeah, just give me your impressions on how the book ends. Aldous.
Well, I think it ends. It ends on the same tone. It ends mid-beat, which I don't think works. If you're gonna release 48 pages and you're gonna have a large expanse of time between them, I think you have to tell concise stories. And in this case, you're not telling a concise story. You're not even telling a coherent story that's linear. You're bouncing around through what, again, my assumption is a what's reality and what isn't. And when you're doing that and then you end on something like that, it lacks the punch that it would have if it was a linear story and ended on something like that. Then you have a hook. right? You've ended a story, and then you have a almost like a prologue or an epilogue where you're throwing a hook out, and you're gonna have somebody look forward to two. But because of
Yeah.
the disconjointed nature of the narrative, all it does is make it even more disjointed. Because now we were here and now we're here, and where do we go? I don't know. And all it does is create more confusion. Like I said, I think I see what they were trying to do. I just don't think it was executed to the fullest context that it possibly could.
What did you got? This reminds me of Groken in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's interesting because of the approach being taken for both. I think is similar with how the intention is for you to kind of get lost in the world a bit. I think Groken ends up doing what is it being attempted here a little better.
Yes, I would agree with that. It still has its same problems, but not as severe as this, because I think this is playing with context a little bit more.
And,
What about
and Groken's trying to do a Euro scene thing, which is it's very, a taste thing.
Yes.
What about you, Matt? What did you think of the payoff at the end? Were you less unsatisfied?
Yeah.
Why?
I'm sorry, I'm eating a lemon head. I was still like wondering what the hell happened. I just still didn't feel like I got a good enough payoff, or that I had like a full story out of it. I mean, maybe if like you're talking about hooks and stuff, like maybe if there was, a scene where you find out that all of this is in a dude's fever dream, and he's like in a fucking bed somewhere, and in a gurney, and that's like oh shit, it's all a fever dream. But then you like pull back, and like the doctors are aware of what's going on in his fever dream, and that would be the hook of like, oh shit, the doctors know what's going on, and then you go back into the fever dream. I'm just spitballing, but I didn't know what was going on, and I was just like, part two.
No,
okay.
You could have had him be wounded by a minion of this demon, and he's fighting an infection, and this is the fever dream that's going on in his head as he's fighting that. Or you could open with the torture sequence, and then everything thereafter there's a lot of narrative techniques you can play around with.
Yeah.
But trying to make this some kind of linear progression doesn't work, in my opinion, with how it's structured. All it becomes is confusing, unless you kind of start really deeply reading into the context of what they're trying to do. Assuming I'm right. I mean, as soon as Corey and Clayton come on, I'm sure they're going to tell me I'm fucking wrong. But that's the.
Does she change into a girl when she's falling at the end? Like when she's having her, it's like she's a woman, and then she's like a skeleton.
There's like a flashback,
and then she's like a little girl. Is that what it is?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that going on. Yeah, because there's
I assume that was like the rape of innocence,
and
like
sometimes it's like, what the fuck? It's like sometimes the faces look good, and then other times you're like, what the fuck is going on?
Well, and to your point,
with, like,
Matt,
the anatomy and shit. Sorry.
To your point, Matt, about the axe too. When he's in the swamp, he actually has the axe on his back, for one scene, and then as he's getting sucked into the muck, the axe is gone. And that kind of consistency happens throughout this book, where somebody will be doing something, and you'll have that moment where the character has either something, or they're in a position, or they've got a cloak on, and then the cloak disappears, or the axe disappears, or a sword disappears. Or in the instance where Lena gets ripped apart, like it's just you feel like there's way too much action. Should always happen in the gutter, but when you have that much action happening in the gutter, it becomes a little disjointed.
So one thing I do that builds on Aldis's point, and this is something that's endemic to crowdfunded comics, I think, as a whole, is when we get the full trade paperback of volumes, however many of KOZOR, right? KOZOR volume, the omnibus version, right? The judgment of the story will be probably wholly different, because we'll have the benefit of, oh, I've read the entire thing now, and if I were able to go to a store and buy the omnibus, we would judge the book on those merits. The point I want to bring up is that if you release books in a serialized format, you have to expect that people will judge them as serialized reading experiences. If you want us to judge books an omnibus like that, because I as a creator myself, I know there's that temptation to go, oh, just wait till I give you the payoff in volume 6. And it's like, that's fine. But if you want those types of payoffs and you want the readers to experience it that way, you have to bundle it and structure what I am getting in a way that correlates to that. Because if I'm getting serialized or monthly installments, I have certain expectations for that. As opposed to
even like Marvel comics are serialized monthly. Every issue, even if it's like dipping into a larger picture, larger story, you're getting a story every issue. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yep. Because the idea was like, write it like somebody had just picked it up. You know, I mean, I know this isn't a Marvel book. I mean, I'm not.
But no,
you know what I'm saying? But it's like,
every book
should have something, and then you're like, okay, we're leading into the next. And I feel like that's a problem with a lot of these books, dude, is like just not a lot of shit is happening. And it's like, you'll see. And it's like,
I'll tell it to you this way. If Tolkien had released The Lord of the Rings in chapter format, most people probably wouldn't have got past like the Shire. It'd be like, oh, well, you know, like I'm showing up for another month of just hobbits doing stuff in Hobbiton. Like, what the hell is this? The fact that he did chop it up. He did have 3 books, but each of those books was enough of a story that you got enough completeness to get to the next point. And the real thing I'm trying to highlight here for crowdfunders is you have an infinite amount of imagination you can bring to the table. But I think we need to be very careful about how we're spending these panel and page budgets, because, like I said, we can only judge what we read in front of us. And if we're putting 2 to 3 years between campaigns, what your story is this prologue so far. And it's not the trade omnibus, the masterpiece that it's going to be. And I think that's something we need to address, because I think readers we're having some issues with that.
Okay, that's a great place to leave off. Let's do final thoughts, and then we'll bring on the Bartons. We'll talk about their career, their backgrounds, and their plans for the future, as well as some of the comments about KOZOR, and see if they can help unravel the mystery for all of the panel. Aldous, why don't you start us off? Final thoughts.
So I think Twitless covered something that was very important, and there's 2 methodologies of storytelling that really you can do, and one is episodic and one is serial. And if you're going to do serial storytelling, even within the context of serial storytelling, you still tell a complete story for each individual episode or issue that fulfills that arc of that serial story. You have to have a story. You do throw out those hooks, but you have to have a complete story. It has to have a quote unquote act 1, act 2, act 3, introduction, a middle, and a conclusion. This doesn't have that. And this is, like Twilla said, God, I hate that I'm agreeing with him, but you have to have that complete story. And here it does. It feels like this is a disconjointed prologue to something that's greater. And we're over a year since I received my book. I definitely want, I'm curious. I'd back more. But the longer that it goes on, something like this, the more you forget it, because it is so disconjointed. And though it asks a lot of questions of the reader, and the reader is formulating those questions, I'm not engaged. So the longer the time drifts between the two, I'm less likely to back. Now, will I still back whatever? Yeah, I consider Clayton and Corey friends, and I'll definitely back, both because I'm curious and because I'm interested to see where they go from here. Given that I know they've gotten a lot of feedback, but with that, I'm that rare customer that's going to back something like this just because I love comics. So there's a lot of people that aren't, and don't count on me as my type of backer as your foundation. You need to get those people that are looking for a good story and want to get hooked, and you got to hook them. And this didn't hook people, I don't think.
Matt Barr, would you like to give us your final thoughts?
Yeah. I was a little confused about stuff. Story wise, I think the guys before me really nailed that. Art wise, some really good rendering, but some of the understructure was just all over the place. Consistency in faces was not a priority. The camera movement was just was pretty static. I would have liked a little bit more angles, a little bit more shot variation. Put that camera on the edge of that axe while he's swinging it.
Right.
Show some action. We got a little bit of action, but we didn't see the big guy get anything going on. So I like the coloring, without totally poo-pooing on it. I did like the coloring. The inking was good. I did like the inking. I just like I'm looking at this page right now and holy moly. Yeah, I it's just not consistent. The artwork isn't consistent. Would I back it again? Would I back KOZOR 2? Yeah, I would. I'm kind of interested to see what's going on, only in like a fucking weird, like train wreck kind of way, I think. That's my
So
last
here's
thing.
a
Oh, and I
question.
see a tangent. I'm looking at a fucking tangent now.
Here's the
Okay.
question for you, Matt. Do you feel? I mean, because like we talked about, man. I mean, you've got page 1, and then you got the page turn, and you're in page 2, and then page 3 is a splash, and then you've got page 4, and then page 5 is a splash with an inset, and then you've got page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, another splash, and page 10. It's page 11. Do you feel there's an overabundance of splashes? Because it seems to be to me, there's just way too many splash pages, especially in that tertiary portion of the book where you really get it's what I described as double page spreads, and you corrected me that they're not double page spreads. There's individual splashes that are just conjoined.
Yeah, and they make them. It makes it feel even more conjoint when they're next to each other. When you have these splash pages with all this like random stuff. Stuff in the beginning. I'm scrolling up, see what you're talking about. I just don't like the poses, man. All the poses all just seem the same. Even when the guy looks like they're like bending over, it just looks like he's like moved the head down a little bit. Like it doesn't even look like somebody's really bending over. Like the orc feeding the hog or whatever. That's all.
Twitless.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Here's this big splash panel there. Yeah, I don't know. They could have been done better. They could have been done. Or double pages would have been dope. But some splashes with some actual action would have been rad.
Twitless. Final thoughts.
Sure. I've already said probably too much, but I think that KOZOR is kind of hard to judge because what we have here is kind of a prologue. I do feel like I would need to read several more chapters before I can do a retrospective and really tell you what I think about this. I will say we don't even really meet the titular KOZOR, so that's a thing to mention. I personally recommend an outline pass for future installments regarding how much of the story is given to the reader. A really hard look about which cards to show and which ones you're going to keep close to the chest. So that's my recommendation. Still, all that being said, the Barton Bros demonstrate here that they can create engaging visual worlds that pique your interest in finding out more about it, especially in a sort of nightmare horror Lovecraftian way. If you like dark fantasy, Conan, Lovecraft, Berserk, Roquefort's Groken for someone from our scene, these things are things you like, I think you'll dig KOZOR. So like just in terms of the aesthetic and kind of like the ingredients that are being kind of placed down, if you're a big fan of that stuff, and I am. So I am interested to see more, but I'm with Aldous that definitely need the second installment definitely needs to hook me to really keep me invested. So
yeah, actually I noticed that about the reviews is when there's like a lot to say, it's you guys are ravenous and just feasting, It's because there was a ton of meat on the bone, and you want that steak to be filet mignon. And you guys are making every effort. You're pointing out the lack of spices and everything. So I think when it generates this kind of discussion, there's clearly something there, and
Right.
people really think that there's a lot of potential. So
Yeah, I want to see more from them. Like I definitely want to see more from the brothers for sure.
yeah,
Like
Yeah,
I'm not looking at this going like these fucking tourists are wasting paper and ink. Get the fuck out of here with this fucking shit. Go back to accounting.
It's not
I want to see.
$4.99 for sure.
Yeah, I want to see them for sure.
gosh.
Yeah, dude, what the fuck? Oh wait,
No, $4.99 is the low bar. That is and not low mat bar, but the low bar. It's that's the tier where I walk completely away, and I never want to deal with that creator again in any way, shape, or form.
Will Red, isn't 499 your favorite book?
it's not my favorite book. All right, let's change the subject now. Speaking of seeing,
is that book on your toilet right
I
now?
am curious because you mentioned we don't ever meet KOZOR, and I think we do. I think KOZOR is the silhouetted figure at the end of the book. I think that's KOZOR. And so when we bring the Barton brothers on, I want to
as
get
well.
that.
There's one at the beginning.
I think my criticism still stands though, because in terms to meeting the character, if it's like, oh, he's a silhouette or a shadow, I'm like, you didn't really meet the character.
No, it defends your position that it's a prologue.
Oh, okay,
and that's
gotcha.
the introduction. Is my point.
Oh, I
I'm
see what
just
you mean.
saying,
Okay, yeah,
I
okay.
think they did fulfill the goal of a prologue in that they are introducing the character at the very end with her as she collapses from exhaustion, and you get that the eye reference that implies that you're now looking through her perspective. And to Matt's point, but it's still the same perspective. That's the moment that you go, oh, that's KOZOR. That's what I think, at least. We'll find out.
That's KOZOR, the silhouette thing.
Yeah, that you can kind of see
standing
through
up
part of his
straight.
torso.
Yeah. He's got that same position too, that same pose.
well, we've got the experts waiting in
Sorry.
the back, so we can
Sorry.
definitely ask them for their insights. So everybody, if you want to see more of the bros, here they are. There's Clayton and Corey. What up, guys?
What's up?
Hey, what's up, Well Read and everybody else? Thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here.
Buddy.
How did you guys like the descent into madness on well-read reviews? So
Yeah, I thought it was great.
yeah,
I gotta take
Reaction.
notes later on.
feel free to curse out any of the reviewers. Tell them they're wrong. They have no idea what the hell they're talking about. Go back to art school, you fakers. So yeah,
No, it's fine.
everything's
I
on
thought
the
you guys
table.
all gave valid criticism. I thought
Cool.
Aldius gave a lot of interesting points on it. So
Yeah, he's the drunkest on the panel, so that helps. Where did you guys get your start? You guys are both out of school, and this is your first project, or have you done other stuff before?
well, I had originally done KOZOR. So basically it started out like this,
Let's see. What do you got going on?
like that.
Uh-huh.
And so all the artwork was remastered by Clayton,
Mhm.
pretty much. So it was like my very first comic book, basically.
Oh, and you do have a Berserk in the back there, so
Yeah.
there we go.
Berserk's great. So
Berserk.
Huge inspiration for KOZOR.
yeah. Great inspiration.
There's a lot of discussion about the story. So why don't you guys tell us a little bit about the inspiration and the process for what you were going for? People thought it was David Lynch, surreal, fever pitch dream.
Oh yeah. Well, we watch a lot of David Lynch, me and Clayton. So there was a big influence from that. Oh geez, I'm trying to recall what everything he's said.
Probably
long
Berserk is one of the biggest inspirations.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
Also, what kind of narrative were you going for? Because Berserk is a pretty linear story, isn't it? Or how would you put it?
Yeah, it is a pretty linear story. It's not like episodic in a way, I guess. Like different parts.
Yeah, it's different in that sense. It's much more like David Lynch. So you don't know really, are you looking at the present? Are you looking at the past? Or are you looking at the future throughout KOZOR? Is this awake or is it a dream? Are you the observer or are you the dreamer, right? So there is a kind of ambiguous flavor to the story, absolutely. And I think that adds to that disorientation adds to the horror of the book. And yeah, we could say, we could explain it, right? And we could tell you that, yeah, the beginning is a dream, the second half is reality. But then does that ruin the mystery to it? You know what I'm saying? Because we would sort of want to keep that intact to an extent. And then I guess in the second version of it ends it ultimately the way Corey was going to write it is there is a little bit more clarity then. And so this first prologue, as you pointed out, is a little bit more mystical in its building up. You guys were talking about showing the monster and just how long you should keep that hidden for. Well, you could see the true mystery surrounding who and what KOZOR actually is. And, a lot of this stuff as to what that figure was at the end of the story, the silhouetted figure, even I wasn't 100% sure exactly who that was. I can't remember if I asked Corey about it and what he told me, but I assumed it was KOZOR as well.
Yeah.
But,
Alice is pretty spot on. I'm surprised he's actually caught that. But
yeah.
Also, the whole panel is stumped about whether or not it was KOZOR at the end.
Oh, so by the way, the other thing is Matt mentioned the whole fever dream aspect. So we were actually attempting to achieve that effect with that big reveal where you've seen in the beginning what Barton was. He was introduced to you in a certain way. This savage warrior that everybody kind of feared, not necessarily respected, but he was definitely the leader of the tribe. He looked like a guy you didn't want to mess with. He's pretty built. But then you get that point within the middle of the story where he wakes up and that crippled, messed up looking guy laying in the bed with the same missing eye as what we seen Barton with in the beginning, that's actually Barton. That's Chief Barton right there. So I love that transition where it started out, you saw him like it's almost disturbing. You see him as this jacked, scary, not gonna fuck with him kind of warrior, and then he wakes up and he is almost the opposite of that. And he wakes up in this bed, and yeah, the past, he has just come out of a dream, and it's a dream that Magator has created. He's making him remember his past. Okay, and so he wakes up, and you can see that he's gone fucking mad, right? That's why we called it Descent into Madness. You see that crow at his cellar window, just taunting him, like, we're gonna get you, Barton. I forget what the dialogue is there. Oh, it's like, Daddy, Daddy,
Yeah.
hear us. And so that I just thought that was sick. And then that's when we get into really probably where the reality of the story begins to take place. And we realize, oh, this story is actually centered around his daughter, Alice. But you realize toward the end that, oh shit, she's got the same affliction as her father has been cursed with. She's also being fucked with by Magator because she passes out, and she falls into her own nightmare. And you can see the manipulation taking place by Magator, because in Chief Barton's dream, he sees himself in a certain light and he sees his daughter in a certain light. And then, yes, at the end, it's flipped around. So you can see that these nightmares are of the same thing, but they're very, very different versions. They're very, very different interpretations. It's like when, 5 people experience an event, they all experience it in slightly different ways. Well, this is a dramatic contrast in the way that it's experienced. It's a dramatic difference in interpretation. And so that's sort of where KOZOR 1 leaves off, and very likely why people are left a little bit like, whoa, what the fuck did I just read? I need to go back and look a little further into that and try to make sense of it.
Yeah, you drove a lot of like David Lynch level discussion on the panel. People were peeling the layers back from that onion. I think the only one who could relate to dreaming of being a big, strong, brutal warrior and waking up as a frail little imp is Twitless. But everybody else was fairly lost.
Dude, I can do more.
No,
yeah,
you
it's-
know it.
Yeah. And I'll say right now, yeah, it's, we definitely are artists before we're writers. And so back when KOZOR was written by Corey originally, I did the final kind of editing on it, working with what he had originally come up with. But yeah, no way will we train writers. In fact, pretty shitty at it, to be honest. Very likely. We took a lot of our writing skills from just watching David Lynch and Berserk and then kind of mashed that together because we were inspired by it. But, yeah, we learn and we improve. For Borok, I certainly tried to educate myself as much as possible. Learned a bunch of different things, like how to introduce a villain, I learned about exposition. Yeah, exposition. Learned about that kind of stuff.
That's the thing.
Lots of fun. And so it's become somewhat of a curiosity of mine, a passion as well. We're into movies which combine visuals and story together. And at the end of the day, we want to give our audience an experience that is of a high level of potency, of engagement, something that they think about long after they've finished watching it. And the more we can learn and the better we can get at doing that, that's when we're going to be fulfilled too. So absolutely. You guys are on point. Of course, we are far from the epitome of what we'll become as comic book artists.
Yeah, you guys are pretty young, aren't you? You're both just at the beginning of your careers.
Well, Corey's hitting 30 this year, and I'm 34, so we're getting up there.
I feel old. I don't want to be old.
That's the YouTube speaking. It ages.
Oh
you.
man.
Yeah.
After this, I'm gonna have some Metamucil.
Yeah.
Get
Oh, gosh.
regular again.
Yeah. Some Metamucil and some suppression socks.
I need my heat pad.
I'm sorry. Did you mean compression socks?
I guess I was joking, but I guess you don't. You actually have them.
He had a Biden moment. Give him a
Well,
break.
No. Like I
Welcome
just
to the
I'm,
academic Twitless.
I'm imagining what suppression socks are like. It's like the SWAT version of a compression
Yes,
sock.
there's socks that lay down suppression fire, so your
Yeah.
feet can move from cover piece to cover piece.
Are there
God damn it.
suppression? Like there's silent.
We all know what
you
he meant. My God.
Suppression socks.
Emma Twitless, did you have a question?
I did have a question.
Go for it.
Socks.
So RC Harvey, who's a scholar and artist, describes the relationship between writing and art in comics. And one of the things he does, he talks about how at a certain point there was almost a tyranny of the writer over the artist. And then in the 90s, you almost got an inversion of that. And what I think is interesting about what you guys are bringing to the table is another wrinkle to the mix, which is not just collaborating with who's doing art and writing, but you're also related. So you have familial relation as part of the added to the mix here. So I want to hear you kind of narrate a little bit about how you collaborate with each other and how these factors play into bringing your story to life.
Corey, do you want to talk about that?
A lot of wrestling on the living room floor when decisions need to be made.
Yeah, we have fights every now and then and disagreements, but I mean, it's hard to say because I had already done KOZOR beforehand, and so Clayton was basically coming in and helping to remaster the entire book. So we didn't really change around the pages, like the page order or anything, but he'd be changing like the dialogue and stuff, or editing it basically, all around editor.
We changed it quite a lot. The original KOZOR was supposed to end at the point at which Chief Barton first wakes up.
Yeah.
So after that is added to the original story. And thank God we remastered it. Otherwise, we would have been reamed even harder after this review. But because let me tell you, there was a lot more inconsistencies in that original version. It's one of the reasons that we're like, shit, we can't put this book out. as is. We should just, and we did have a lot of people saying, like, just release it. It looks great already. And I was like, yeah, no. And so today's review actually was like kind of vindicating in a sense, because I was like, oh yeah, thank God we actually went back and addressed some of those issues, because a lot of the issues that were touched on, there was just worse representations of those in the original version. So, you know, there's that. But yeah, working with Corey and him working with me, it's an interesting combination. I think we work really well together, actually, especially when Corey listens to what I'm saying and sees reason. But even if, but even when he doesn't at first, eventually he does come around and he's like, "Oh shit, man, you're right." And so that's, I hate being right though. I really hate it. Just once,
man,
I want
I'm
Corey
right
to say,
sometimes.
"Clayton, you're wrong," and then I want to be really wrong about it, and I want him to show me something amazing. But you know, that happens probably sometimes, and he'll show me. He'll show me at some point, no doubt. Probably already has. But no, it was great. Like, we're very proud of what we were able to accomplish with KOZOR. It certainly pushed each of us to the very brink of what we were capable of at the time. Like, I certainly developed a lot of my rendering abilities during that particular endeavor, and Corey developed a lot of his coloring abilities as well over that time. I mean, Corey, how many times did you have to color those clouds?
That is ridiculous. Oh, what
Yeah.
did you think about? I think Matt was talking about your face consistencies and stuff.
As in, did the faces look the same from one character, from one representation of the character to the next? Yeah, there's probably some inconsistencies there. I was working over the top of Corey's stuff, so I did redraw a lot of it, but it was still very much based, like the placement of the characters and the poses of them was still based on what Corey had originally come up with for a lot of those pages. So yeah, I mean, honestly, to be quite frank with you, I still have trouble getting my faces consistent. I think every
It's a
artist
hard
tends
thing.
to.
It's super hard.
Yeah,
It is hard.
Yeah.
absolutely.
I
But it's
do-
something we can always be better at.
I do want to say, I know that we definitely had constructive criticism, but I do want to say that if this is you guys at kind of the at an earlier stage of what you guys can bring, that's impressive by itself, you know,
Yeah,
because
for sure.
imagining where
Yeah,
you'll
thanks.
be, you know, at level 2 or 10, you know, I'm just
Well, yeah. If
that's-
this is neophyte, I'd hate to see what happens when you guys hit adept. It's
yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Twillis.
It was like there's
Appreciate
lots of
that.
like really good stuff, and I think juxtaposed next to the stuff that I didn't like made the stuff that I didn't like even more glaring, because I saw a lot of stuff that I did like. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And
it's
the-
like, this is a really tasty meal. You're at a restaurant, you're eating the most delicious meal you've ever had, and you find a piece of glass in it.
Fuck, and then I wasn't gonna go to glass. I was
Yeah.
I was thinking of like, oh, I'm eating this creme brulee and there's a fucking slice of pickle in it. You know what I mean? You're just like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna
And then
keep
you get
eating
Gordon
this,
Ramsay.
but there's a
Right.
goddamn
It's
pickle in
the
here.
difference. It's the difference in flavor. But like right off on page 4, you guys knock it out of the park with almost a Yog Sahathian being with all these eyes as the mutated form of Alice just
Yeah, that was
forms
hot.
up into what that is. I love everything about that page,
It's pretty sick.
except for the story that goes along with it. Like it's you've got almost got two different things going on, and it's like the script and the page didn't come together until the very end, and then it was kind of laid out in a different way. And that's where I think the book, in a lot of ways, there's so many splash pages that are absolutely beautiful, but they just don't fit the story. The art's there.
Yeah, you got
the
that-
story.
Yeah, that's
The
fair
story doesn't respect the art, and I think that's one of the, to me, a story is always number one, because story is going to bring me back for number 2. So Matt's, I know the exact opposite, but man, because he always wants that sick art, and you've got the sick art.
Give me them double page spreads, yo.
Yeah, and that
We'll spread it for you, Matt. We'll spread it for you. Don't
Spread
worry.
it out.
Next time
Okay,
round.
so
Spread that Australian honey out for me, man.
one thing I want to see, because at the very end, when we jump to Alice's story, you've got this monster and his like partner, and it's like straight out of Dark Souls. And so I just need to see a page like that with like the boss health bar at the bottom, and then the name, and then the subtitle of the name, like, you know, core draft,
Yeah,
you know, the wailing goddess or whatever. So you're definitely
totally.
you're definitely channeling that aesthetic very well, and so that's definitely a hit.
Yeah,
It
thanks.
comes from Corey for sure, because he loved The Witcher too, and he was
I
no
played
doubt.
those Dark Soul games
Yeah.
after I'd done KOZOR, and I was like, damn. I think I played Elden Ring first.
Oh,
I
really?
was like, wow. So
Well,
might be
But,
a bit of that in the second book.
with that page that Twitless mentioned, it is a fantastic, and it is another splash. And we mentioned this quite frequently. Splash pages, in my opinion, should be used sparingly. I'm guessing Matt disagrees with me, but I think they should be used sparingly. And there's an overabundance of them here, and they always seem to be utilized for introductories, and you've got a lot of introductory moments. But with something like that, that sings, man, and that could be a 2-page spread, because you've got this sense of mass behind him, that he's not just bipedal, because you see the legs, but then he's dragging this mass, almost like he has a thorax that extends beyond his torso. Build onto that, man. Give me something with that. Show me that this creature is just an absolutely inhuman monster as it's coming across. And then instead of having this little neophyte nymph that's on its shoulder, refer to it as, like, in the third, it's not even directly like, call it by its name. Like, tell me what this creature is, because I need a name. Because, like Twitless said, and again, this is why I hate this book, because I'm agreeing with Twitless. But I need some kind of context for what this is, because that page is fantastic, and it's one of your best designed monsters, next to that introductory where Alice's face completely morphs into this Yog-Sothothean creature. I want to see more of that. I want to see more of, tell me what's going on, at least with when you have something like this. Obviously, Alice's mutation is a dream sequence, but here we have something that's real. Tell me what this monster is, because I want to know about it. I want an action figure. I want it now. Give me that.
Oh, wait, do you mean this one?
Sorry, one
No,
second.
he's talking about the one with the witch.
Yeah, the one with the metal
Oh, the
cage
one
on
with
its
the witch.
head.
Oh, right. Fair enough. Yeah.
Can we see?
It's almost it's very Hellraiser, because it's got its chest opened up and you can see the muscles of its abdomen.
Dude, that's and Dark Souls lifted so much out of from Berserk, so like they have a common root, but that's a Dark Souls boss.
No, not that one, Corey.
No,
Dude,
not
the one with the witch in the
confused.
snow. The one with the witch in the snow.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
That's
You
like
guys are right.
Ornstein and Smog, the boss fighters. I'm imagining the whole.
Did you find it? Let's see.
This one.
Yeah, that one.
Oh,
There
wow.
you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
see,
thing is awesome.
give me a double page spread of that creature with it on one side and its massive, whatever it's dragging behind it, however long that is. Extend that out across that page, and then really accentuate that highlight of that creature design, because that creature design is fantastic. That's one of my favorite.
Yeah, heck yeah.
Quote,
I'll
unquote,
do that
bad
for
guys.
sure on the next book.
Matt makes
sure.
great points too about the dynamic poses and like seeing them do action, and so it'd be awesome to see some pages like that too,
Yeah,
just from
for
personal
sure.
taste.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And
Now,
as
as a final comment, the page shortly after that, so you go from that page to the next page. So 1, 2, 3, 3 flips after that, you've got this beautiful. It is so Howard Chaykin. I love you guys for doing this, man. And it's the figure of Alice in the nude falling, and then at the very bottom, it's just her face. That, like, chef's kiss. Fucking well done. It is absolutely exceptional. That is a page that you could rip it out of this magazine and put it into any heavy metal issue from like 1978 after the big Mobius push. And you really get some of the North American and European artists singing and doing some of the other stuff till about 89. You could drop that into a heavy metal issue and it would perfectly fit. It is absolutely exquisite. So that page is probably my favorite page in the book. I'm not sure narratively what's going on, but that's okay because it's gorgeous. And Corey, well done on the tits.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks.
There you go. Yeah,
Clearly
your
it's-
point about the story and the importance of the story, Aldous. Corey and I talk about that a lot, and we have been talking about it. We still do. It is important to get right. And it's not only got to be engaging and have the kind of depth to it that people love tucking into, but it's also got to, as a concept, make sense. And it's got to be easy to get. And I think that, for example, KOZOR had a lot of depth to it. But then there's the surface presentation. There's like the wrapping paper, right? Like, what's the wrapping paper going to be? And I think that is where we had a difficult problem. Like, what's the elevator pitch, essentially? And how do you not only make it easy to get, but also make it compelling at the same time? Like, you think about a video game like, I don't know, like Half-Life, for example. Half-Life's one of my favorite video games. And that's got mystery to it. That's got depth to it. There's a conspiracy behind it. But at the end of the day, what it really is the scientists have created an interdimensional porthole, a rift in reality, a rift in our dimension that aliens have started invading through. And now it's your job to essentially shoot and live and survive. And that's simple. It's easy to get. But behind it is like a government conspiracy, some mysterious guy who's running the show. And that's kind of like what I've been talking to Corey about a lot recently with our upcoming titles. And so I do think it's important to keep in mind, because you can have the prettiest visuals in all the world, but just like a video game with good graphics, that wears off pretty quickly if the gameplay isn't good.
It's a great chance to segue into your upcoming title. So tell us a bit about pronounce this for me because I'm going to butcher it.
Andromenoids.
Andromenoids. Thank you.
Huh, who would have thought that it's pronounced exactly how it's spelled?
Damn. I failed again.
Well, you say it like this. This is the pronunciation. Andromenoids. Like it's from the 80s. It's like
That's pretty good.
Cheesy 80s.
I'll get Clayton to do the trailer voiceover again.
In a time.
Yeah. So Andromenoids is like a set in a post-apocalyptic future where there's like human survivors in like a walled off kind of like a city place. And they're under constant attack by all these mutants from the nuclear fallout. And they create these Andromenoids, which are like superhuman soldiers to fight the mutants, basically.
Well, and so what process are you going through in crafting this story based on these experiences that you're telling us, and how you want to keep these layers, as well as have something that can be enjoyable from just an experience perspective without getting into subtext?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to do Andromenoids a lot more straightforward. So there's no real like dream sequences or anything like that. There is a bit of a prologue. I'm going to have at the start of a book showing the nuclear war, and then it's going to get into the sort of next part where it introduces the characters and then their mission, and then they go on the mission. That's the book. So,
are you two collaborating on this, or is this just you, Corey?
This is just my book.
Oh,
Clayton's
just Corey
on Borok.
Oh, do you have a link for that? Because I wouldn't mind showing that off as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll pop it in the chat.
Cool.
I'll pop it in the private chat there.
Clayton, do you do art or do you write and Corey does the art? Is that the balance here?
I do both, and Corey is doing both for Andromanoids as well. So I'm not writing Andromanoids in any way. For Borok, it was a bit of a different story because what I ended up doing is I wrote that and did the layouts for it. I actually based a lot of the storyline for Borok on the layouts initially. So I wrote the script around the layouts because I like to play these things out in my head like a movie. And so I was responsible for laying that out and doing the story for it. And then I hired Julius Gopez, a really amazing artist who I feel like captured that old school Savage sort of Conan appeal, the Alfredo Alcala aesthetic that I was really digging at the time. Got him on board to do most of the book. At least it was going to be longer, and it might still end up being longer, to be honest with you, just hearing about your thoughts here today and really rounding the book up into a conclusion. Because, I think that is important. But Julius had to tap out. Unfortunately, he ended up getting pretty sick and he was in hospital for a while and wasn't able to keep going with the book. But it's okay because that means I'm coming in to wrap up the art. Luckily, I can do art too.
Well, so what is that experience going back and forth between collaborating with each other and then jumping back into your own projects? Are you thinking of doing shared universes?
This is a shared universe with KOZOR. So Borok is set in the same universe, and actually Chief Baron and Borok do have somewhat of a history that Corey and I have talked about that will integrate into later stories. But the experience of working together and then going into our own thing, you can imagine after working on Corey's book, how hungry I was to get back to something of my own. Corey had also developed his own ideas too. And so we've kind of gone ahead and decided to focus on separate projects this time around, while also still working together at the same time. So it's still Barton Bros. We're still doing our thing. But we're just focused on our own books now, which is kind of cool. Yeah. And so as far as the next hit of KOZOR, I would say that's going to be Borok, for those of you who are a fan of KOZOR. Now, it's not as ambiguous or as mystical or as in-depth as KOZOR. There's certainly a lot of character development to each cast within the story of Borok. But as far as how the plot is played out and how it's paced, it's very straightforward, but it's very engaging too. So you're still going to have those moments throughout where you're like, oh, holy shit, damn, what is happening here? Certain reveals about particular characters that you didn't maybe expect. That exposition factor where you're like, oh, wow, so this paints the character that I've gotten to know so far in a whole different light now. And so it's pretty exciting, and I'm having a lot of fun working on Borok.
Sorry, Aldous, did you have a question? I thought I heard you chime in.
No, I can say one thing though, and the last time that somebody mentioned film as a reference was in reference to the Mavericks campaign that we reviewed the book, and both Twitless and I had some things to say on that. And I will say that be very careful when you're looking at layouts as film, because you're not doing thumbnails for film. You're writing a sequential art book. It's a comic book. Art, and when you're talking sequential art, action happens differently than when you're doing thumbnails for a film. So always be careful with that, because they're two different mediums and they operate completely different. Action needs to happen in different styles and sequences, and you have to be, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Obviously you guys are fans of Savage Swords, so you know a lot of the tricks that have been used over the years and perfected, but
of course,
be very careful with that, because you can very quickly deviate into missing things. And there's some evidence of that here, like we talked about, where there's just too much action happening in the gutter. And you can also get to having too much action happening in the panel. And you don't want to you don't want to lean too heavy in one way or the other consistently. You kind of want to keep that blend magical. So keep looking at those Savage Swords for reference, and you'll be fine.
Oh, certainly, yeah. And it's not like, so I do think that Borok will be described as cinematic, but it's not going to look like it's just screen caps from a movie. All right. So definitely, I hear what you're saying there, Aldous. I think that it's about making sense of how things are going to play out in my head, and I'm a visual person, so I got to see it. Like if I'm reading a script, maybe I can make that for another person, but if I'm trying to compose a story, and I'm trying to make it rich, like I can't do that through written word. I've got to be able to see it in front of me. I've got to be there, seeing it play out. And then I take the keyframes from that, and I pick the most appropriate panels and the best way to order them in order to make that a compelling comic book medium expression of the story. But I certainly understand where you're coming from there. We've heard that many times from many different, especially comic artists who are like,
Right.
yeah,
And then
it's not a movie.
As a metaphor to add on to that, since you're both Lynch fans, you know, Lynch did Blue Velvet. He did The Elephant Man. And while we're not going to talk about Dune, he did Wild at Heart.
Highway?
Lost Highway comes later, but I'm trying to hit the trifecta of before he did the disconjointed, which Lost Highway is the Kafka-esque journey.
It is weird as hell.
Drive, which is
Love it.
definitely
Amazing.
Yeah, I love it too.
Disconjointed, and then you've got Inland Empire, which is his last film, and it's a total disconjointed journey on what you're not even sure what's happening and what's real and what's dream, even more so than Mulholland Drive. But go back and look at what he did first, and as he's coming up, what you see are linear progressions before he starts playing with disconjointism, really messing with what are you seeing. Eraserhead notwithstanding, I'm talking theatrical releases.
Yeah.
For commercial success, which is where I'm leading you, you have to win over an audience before you can play with the audience, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I completely like what you guys are doing and the path you're headed down. I would just tug the reins a little bit and go with a little bit more story with some of this
Absolutely.
awesome. You've got the art. A little more action, like Matt said, like I said, like Twitless said, a little more action for sure. And especially when it comes to art, always listen to a guy like Matt Barr, who's an excellent artist. But man, with that, like I said, that last page where you've got the dynamics, you've got that beautiful heavy metal feel, man, lean so heavy into that because that's epic.
Yeah.
What's your take, Bar, actually, on cinema versus comics? Because we have that discussion a lot here about how the visual representation of comics is so different, but there is a lot of storyboarding that happens in books. Do you feel like you're more of a comic traditionalist, or how do you approach it?
I went to school for comic book illustration. I went to SVA, but then I ended up doing storyboards professionally because, the big two is so fucking hard to get into. You just end up like doing other art jobs, and storyboarding was what I did. And it's similar, but there's definitely, it's similar, but it's two different languages. You know what I mean? It's like Italian and French. You know what I mean? It's like it's similar, but it's very different.
Can you translate the language of the comic for us, for the layman's on the panel?
What do you mean, translate it?
How would you speak in comic language, whereas you would not speak that way in storyboarding? What kind of inflections do you look for? What kind of rhythm do you try to
there seems to be a lot of
page?
like, okay, we need to show a lot of like the little like controlling of the moments. It's a little easier. There's more of like controlling the tempo in the comic book. I feel like when I'm just doing storyboards, like they're like, okay, we want this shot, we want this shot, we want this shot, we want this shot. There's not a lot of like controlling the tempo of the viewer, at least from my stuff. But when I'm doing comic books, and I'm like, okay, I want to like control the time that this person's like looking at different things. Does that make sense?
One of the I mentioned this in the back room, but one of the things that Terry Grunston talks about in System of Comics is how comics are a network of reading. They're interconnected, whereas in cinema you basically have one frame that changes in front of you. With comics, because of not just of how the fact you can flip back with pages, but the fact that when you look at verso recto, left and right on a page, you are simultaneously seeing the entire spread in front of you, and you're also kind of registering it on a panel to panel level, and you're bouncing back often. And so your reading of a comic book spread on left and right hand page is always going to be different than one image on a screen that is then replaced with another image on a screen. What that allows you, right, and what that allows you to do is it allows you to do extremely different structural things. Like if you like Perez and others who are able to just like, maybe line up 9 panels that are extremely vertical to imply, a moment that's maybe thin, maybe only occurs for a second, but still has a lot of still imply a certain weight to it. So just what you can do with layouts essentially, and with your breakdowns with comics is always going to be very, very different than what storyboards themselves can do for film. And comics sing when you're able to really tie into that language, as Matt Barr is saying.
I watched.
You have to adapt it.
In the one of the classes that I took, we were watching like The Godfather Part 2. Or like, okay, like he the dad, what's his name, Vito Corleone. So it's like before he kills the guy and becomes like a true mobster, he's like moving from left to right on the screen, right? The whole time he's moving left to right on the screen. Then it switches to the bad guy. The bad guy is moving right to left on the screen. So it's like it's showing that the bad guy is moving down the left-hand path. He's heading left, which makes it registers weird in your eyes because you're reading shit that goes left to right. Like our eyes are used to doing that. So when you have stuff going in the opposite direction, it's like a subconscious cue that's wrong. There's something wrong with that. So as he's like stalking the bad guy, he's like creeping across the rooftops. He's going from left to right. Then he does the murder, right, in the little vestibule area, kills the guy, goes back up to the roof, breaks his gun apart, and then starts his journey from right to left. So he then starts, he's now going towards the left for the rest of the movie, or not rest of the movie all the way, but like a lot of the times he's facing in the opposite direction now. So it's just like stuff like that you can kind of incorporate some of that, some of that movement.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
And the other thing is that when I'm talking about going through your mind and watching your comic book story unfold as if it were a movie, yeah, you still have to adapt it into a comic book format. So that means, although there might be establishing shots that movies and comic books share in common, you're not going to be taking the dimensions of a cinema screenshot and putting that in your comic book. Now you're going to go, all right, what is going to be the most appropriate sort of panel that I can use for my establishing shot? And you pick that, usually it's going to be a wide one that stretches across the top or something like that, or maybe down the side. But the point is that you have to really consider that every moment within your story. It's not just the images within the panels. It is the panel itself and the way in which you present that on the page. And then it's the combination of those panels. Forget who said it now, but that was a great point. The whole page is, I think it was eTwitless, the whole page is a composition.
So the term, I think it's called hyperframe. It's used at times.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that has to be taken into account. Now, I'm not actually aware of I do know that if you think that you can just take a movie and then convert it into frames within a comic book, without actually knowing what makes a comic book work, there's multiple ways to do that wrong. And I'm not even sure that I'm necessarily aware of some of those. So Aldous, when you're when you give out that warning against thinking of your comic book story as a movie as opposed to a comic, what pitfalls do you foresee? Like, say there's somebody that decides that they're going to start out their comic and they're seeing it as a movie. What are the dangers that they can run into? Like, when you look at their page, how have they messed that up?
It's really simple. And actually, Warren Ellis explains this in 3 essays in his series Fell. And I highly recommend every artist pick them up just for the essays in the back. Because as a writer, he's talking about working with Ben Templesmith, and he's talking about the beats that he's looking for. And beats are important. And Fell is such a great tool to talk about this because it's based on a 9-panel grid. And when you're talking about a 9-panel grid, you're talking about half measures, full measures, and then long measures. So it's like a song, but you're looking at it as what the reader looks at it. And each panel is a half measure. So sometimes you want to keep that for a full measure. You want to drag that panel across. So in a 9-panel grid, I might drag that moment across 2 panels and then have 1 panel of action and then have 3 panels after it and then have 1 exceptionally long panel beyond it. But I'm thinking always in that 9-panel grid or a 16-panel grid or 4x4, whatever works for your story, but you're thinking in terms of beats. What are my story beats? When do I need to occur? To go back to Conan, if you're talking, because you guys are Savage Sword fans, when you think of the scene where Arnold Schwarzenegger in Conan the Barbarian gets his sword, the scene where he pulls it from the Atlantean king's hands and then smashes the rust off of it, that's a single panel. That only needs to be a single panel. 1 panel, pull it out of his hands. 1 panel, smash the rust off of it. But in the movie, that panel lasts longer because it's more impactful visually for him to smash it more than once. But in the book, you don't need him to smash it more than once. You just need him to smash it once to get the effect. And then you can do something else transitionary to move the story along while still carrying on that moment. And that's the beat aspect. And it's understanding your beat context of how do you keep the story moving while still doing that exposition. Because when you've got action, that's easy. But how do you keep the story moving? How do you keep the reader engaged with that beat mentality of keeping it moving, and across the page and guide the eye? All those things come in.
I'd like
So
to.
the problems with beats really is
like,
what you're warning against.
I'd like to pick that up. It's to for me personally, when I've also Aldous and I have rung this bell quite a bit. For me, beats are important. I look at I pay special attention to the composition as a whole because a comic is essentially a kind of it's like a collage.
Well, it's a page. Each page is you have to focus. The page has to make sense and it has to flow.
Each page is a work of art.
That's kind of where I'm going with. And so when I've seen people who lean too much into cinema, there's usually an over reliance on splashes, but not just splashes them. It's not just that they're relying on splashes, but they're relying on splashes that are meant to emulate film, and then things just move very sequentially. And so you'll just get a lot of sequential images that tell a story cinematically, but then when you look at the art composition as a whole, you're not seeing much on that on left and right hand page. You just see the movement of story. And what I'm trying to say, warn against is the fact that comics can do more than just move a story along. They can symbolically and metaphorically communicate things to our minds so that the story is not just moving, it is communicating. So like, thematics, it can be kind of like a poetry, that's to pull Aldis's idea of a song. You can have a rhyme. You can have the lower right-hand corner
It should
of
always
the
rhyme.
page
It should
rhyme
always
with
rhyme.
with the top left hand corner.
The
You can you can
mirror-
play
like-
against that, but what I'm but the fact of the matter is that comics is not just storytelling; it is art and storytelling.
Well, it's a
And-
different. You're hitting different portions of the human brain when you're reading a book versus watching a movie, and so you have to keep that in context. You guys understand this, whether it's conscious or unconscious, because you're mirroring in KOZOR with
Right.
what's going on with Baron versus what's going on with his daughter. You're mirroring that concept. However you guys define it, you understand this concept because it's in your book. That you've bookended it with the father and the daughter, the generational concept. Those metaphors are there. I've got the beats. They're there. I need that essence to come across through the whole book. And what you've got it on, like I said, the front end, the back end. You didn't take me from the front end to the back end completely. That's the journey. That's the song, right? Your opening is awesome. Your closing is great, but man, I need the chorus and the refrain to get me there. And your chorus and refrain are just a little off tune.
Need that meat. The bread's good, but the meat is what matters.
Exactly.
I got to go, guys, unfortunately, but I want to thank you so much for having me on. Well read, Twitless, Matt, and Aldous. Always a pleasure talking to you guys. Hopefully we get to do it more often in the future. But thanks
Absolutely.
again for the amazing review.
Thanks so much for
We're
showing
taking
up.
notes.
Good evening.
We're taking
Yeah.
notes.
Thank you for
Thank
sharing
you.
thank you for making this. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Yeah, so we can wrap early if people have other commitments. And I did actually. So since we're on this topic, and there is one thing I wanted to ask about before we head out. I'll probably defer to Bar since he did study this, and I'm curious on his thoughts on it. I'm a layman, but one of the things also that are different between doing storyboard layouts and working with a comic book is you're anticipating that an actor is going to be occupying the space that you're laying out in the storyboards, and they're going to be contributing a performance that you're not necessarily defining. But when you're drawing a comic, you have to be able to communicate the performance in your art. Is there a conscious effort to have to be able to deliver that on the page, knowing that an actor isn't going to be doing that on your behalf?
I like doing the comic books because I can like act out the characters more. I'm like kind of animating and thinking about what they're doing. When I'm doing storyboards, I'm like making sure that the person looks like that person.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So
you're not conscious.
a lot of my stuff, it has to be like approved. Like they're like, yeah, we have to send these storyboards over to get approved, and usually they're just getting approval on like appearances, and they're just kind of like standing there.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you're not thinking of like how the comic is going to communicate emotionally, thematically in terms of like how you're doing the art, whereas like an actor might be conscious of that, like how they want to deliver a particular role. You
kind of open that up. I don't really put that much effort into it because it's like their job. You know what I mean? They'll see the boards and then they'll decide how they want to act.
And how do you do that as the comic artist?
Well, as a comic artist, I mean, we're the director, the set designer, the costume designer. We are the people. So, I'm reading the script, kind of thinking about what that person's saying. Then I like think about the phonics of what the person's saying, and then I kind of think about which one would be the coolest. That way they're not just like standing there mouth closed with like word balloons. I like to kind of like pick something and then focus on that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So Corey, how are you dealing with your new book after working with your brother before? Are these things that are in your mind, in your consideration, now that you're delving back into making your own comic again?
I'm just trying to suck up all the advice and information we got on KOZOR, so I'm probably going to go back and study this and just change up and draw notes and make sure it's good. Yeah,
Cool.
Been a great stream, guys.
Yeah. This is a creator boot camp here, so it's tough and people sweat it out, but I think they come out ready for battle once they go through it. So that's what we're trying to deliver.
We don't make you do jumping jacks with your shirt off, though. So
Building the comic book army of the future. So, all right. So thanks a lot to the Barton Bros. Thank you, Clayton, Corey. Been great meeting you guys, having this discussion. KOZOR was an amazing book to talk about. There's a lot there for the panel to go over. So we're really looking forward to future work from you guys. And
absolutely,
everybody go out and sign up for and Dominoids and Boron. Did I say that wrong again?
Really, man?
Sign up for Adrenochrome.
And Dromonoids. Sorry, I missed the R. I was reading my chat and I missed the R in how I spelled it. And Dromonoids. And Borok. Definitely awesome stuff coming from the Barton Bros. And have a good night, everybody. And we'll see you again real soon. Twitless, Matt Barr, Aldous, pleasure as always. Thanks a lot, guys.
Wow. Good night.
Good night.